Peace, peace, peace. How's everybody doing out there? I hope everybody's doing well. Just wanted to build a little bit about Jada and Will's situation that everybody's talking about. The main component or word that was used was entanglement. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about entanglement because when you bring the world of science into it, you have quantum entanglement. And quantum entanglement means that no matter over what space or distance two particles are separate from each other, when one spins, the other one spins simultaneously with it. So that's a unified field, right? That shows that it's all a field of mind, right? And so through human experience, we all have an entanglement with all concepts, ideas, thoughts, physical things, and the human side versus the being. To be is to be related. The being is the spiritual side, it's the fourth dimension. The human is the third dimension, right? The physical side. And you have biochemistry or biochemical endorphins that go along with this entanglement that you have. Everything that you interact with, you have an entanglement with. That's first and foremost. But then you have attachments now that come along with the entanglement. The attachment is addictions, right? And we're all addicted to something, starting with me. And what I learned from watching is, they use the word on a more mundane level, but they didn't get into the deeper sciences of it. And I'm just here to talk about the sciences of it. I saw the memes, I saw the videos, the music video that they made to it. It was hilarious, to be honest with you. But I like to extrapolate the lesson from it. And so, when you're talking about quantum entanglement, you're talking about the micro versus the macro, right? On a micro level and how it's corresponding to the macro level. So my ideas and thoughts are all entanglements, right? Concepts are ideas going on in the mind of the observer. So everything that you have an entanglement with is the observed. You are the observer having an entanglement with the observed. You don't necessarily have to have an attachment to it, but more times than not, if it makes you feel good, you're gonna have an attachment to it. So what do I mean by that? Jada was, in her own words, she said she was looking to feel good again. She just wanted to feel good again. In other words, she wanted to feel alive. And through biochemical endorphins, oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical, endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, right? So all these things are playing a factor in the interaction between the observer and the observed. Now, August was the observed in her mind, and he was there to fulfill something that she wasn't getting from Will, from her perspective, from her POV. Now, we all have these situations that we go through. We have to be real about it. You know what I'm saying? I'm being real about it. But it takes a certain level of awareness. It takes a certain level of fine-tuning to be able to admit that, have a high self-awareness, right? And monitor your attachment to what you're entangled with. Because entangle, look at the word etymologically, or how words are put together, right? You have meant, the mind, and you have entangled. Entangled is to tie or yoke together, right? So in experience, you always tie it to something, externally and internally, because your thoughts are also entangled energy, swirls of energy that's going on in the field of mind, of your own mind, not someone else's mind, because my addiction is different than your addiction. Your addiction is different than mine, right? So we just have to be real about how we go about looking at entanglement. So I also deal with thesis and antithesis and synthesis. So the thesis is entanglement, right? And how she literally damaged Will Smith's brand because he had a image going on, even though there was a lot of rumors swirling around about their lifestyle. I'm not really here to get into that. I'm more dealing with the science of what was revealed to the world, right? And the truth is that we all have that entanglement going on. We can't get around it. To say we don't have it going on is to lie to oneself, and I'm not really into that. I'm trying to always arrive at the truth and see what I can find within reality, because within reality borns truth, right? So what's the reality behind a said thing? So for those two, going again, you have thesis that she ended up messing up his brand. You have the antithesis. Well, somebody would say, well, she had to get her because he wasn't providing it, right? And then the synthesis is the whole elements and variables put together and analyzed from a bird's eye view. And then you put it back together, you disassemble it, you put it back together, you disassemble it, and you're analyzing it from different perspectives to arrive at a reality that will hopefully yield truth to it, right? So at the end of the day, entanglement is something that we all go through, and no man or woman is exempt. As long as you're having this human experience, you're going to have entanglements. In fact, people have entanglements with cigarettes, weed, alcohol, Molly, etc. I have an entanglement with playing Madden, right? I play Madden football on PS4, but I can drop that entanglement whenever I want, because like right now I haven't played since December. We're in July. Today's July 16th. So you just have to be able to monitor what kind of entanglements you have going on and know that as long as you're alive having this experience, you're not free from it. But you have to be aware of it, right? And there's a certain level of self-awareness that now creates self-transformation. And in self-transformation, you have self-elevation, right? And you have different forms of evolution of self. Because it's always really about self-perspective, and perspective precedes behavior. So whatever your perspective is going to push whatever your behavior is. You can't get around it, right? I think when you line it up that way, you're dealing with the actual reality, and you're not lying to yourself. In therapy, I call this therapy, breaking this stuff down. In therapy, there is no lying. You just tell the truth, because in telling the truth, you learn to see where the flaws are, and you learn to fix yourself, because it's really about fixing yourself, right? And through these things, through the entanglement now, the entanglement serves as the mirror effect, right? So you're using something other than yourself to learn more about yourself, which is self-discovery. And only through entanglement can you go through that process. There is no separation with it, right? So, instead of me clowning them and getting into the gossip aspect of it, and like I said, the memes were funny as hell, I ain't gonna lie. But what is the lesson behind it? How can I view their situation to refine myself, right? And what am I entangled to or with, right? And I have to be realistic about it. I can't sit here and lie to myself and act like I'm not a part of the whole entanglement on a quantum level, right? And because I deal with quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and the power behind understanding what that is. If you just for some research for you to do, you can look up the double split experiment. Very deep, It states that everything, the atom is a wave and a particle, depending on who's observing it and when it's being observed. So as it's passing through the slit, if no one's observing it, it stays as a wave. But when it's passing through the slit or the double slit, and an observer is monitoring it, when it reaches the wall in the back, you see it converts into a particle, right? So this is one of the bases of, excuse that noise for me. This is one of the bases of quantum physics, right? And the mechanics of how things work on a mechanical level, quantumly, right? And what does that have to do with you, right? And how do you use that in everyday real time in order to navigate this third dimension of physicality that we're in the middle of, right? This is how I try to use it, to better myself. It's a form of striving for perfection, knowing that I'm never going to reach perfection, because the only perfection is in death. As long as I'm alive, I'm going to be in a sinful state. I'm going to fall short of perfection, because I'm constantly in a classroom of learning something other than myself about myself. right? So I have to go through something other than me to know about me. That's an entanglement, right? On a third dimensional level and on a quantum level, because this body that I'm in is made of particles, right? It's molecular, right? So I'm entangled with all these physical things around me. Why? Because they're teaching me things about me that I couldn't know if it didn't present itself as the mirror, as the reflection, right? So relationship is the mirror effect for you to see who you are, right? Good, bad, or indifferent, it doesn't really matter. As long as you get that aspect of the mirror effect and what it's trying to show you, right? And don't get too much into the what I call the blame game, TBG, right? It just is. Don't get too deep into labeling it, because as human beings, naturally we want to label things, right? Because it's kind of like sorting it out, putting it into perspective. So I get that part, you know. But don't get caught up in the emotional part when you label it, because when you label something evil, you tend to have disdain toward it, and then you miss the whole lesson. How do you extrapolate the lesson? You know what I'm saying? That's what you have to do, respectively. And I think in this journey that I've been on for the last 27 years, I'm getting better slowly but surely at pulling whatever the lesson is as time reveals itself more. Time, right? The change in observable values, rather. That's what time is. Or a measure of energy, that's time, right? You know, and so in this whole entanglement, back to Will and Jada, it's a deep thing. And there's a lot of lessons to learn from that. There's a lot of lessons to learn from the 25-year span that they were together. 25 years is a long time. How do you reinvent yourself within 25 years if one partner has outgrown the other partner, right? Because now when you agree to marry, you have what's called a covalent bond, right? That's when two atoms share the same electron. So let's say metaphorically the electron is the union, the bond, you're sharing that. But when one atom begins to outgrow the other atom, you have a dysfunction of how they're sharing the electron, metaphorically speaking. So look at it that way. And, you know, Will's brand is definitely damaged. I will say that. The counter argument now is that, like I was saying before, is that he wasn't fulfilling his duty to make her happy. But you can't make somebody happy. It's not possible. I think this is the romanticized aspect of relationships that we look at. One atom is responsible for the other atom. No. Y'all sharing an electron covalently, bonded together, like I said before, but it's not my job to make someone else happy. It's not her job to make me happy. You can add to my happiness, right? By resonating on the frequency of things that I subscribe to, and I can resonate on the frequency of things that she subscribes to. And we should know what each other subscribes to when we meet each other, as we get to know each other and learn each other as time goes on, right? So putting all of that in perspective, bringing it back home, is really about understanding all your entanglements. No man, no woman, no experience is free from entanglement, right? Because it's part of the firmament. Firmament means a field of activity going on in the mind of the observer only, right? What's going on in my mind is different than what's going on in your mind. My problems are different than your problems, right? You won't know what my problems are unless I tell you so, and I won't know what your problems are unless you tell me, because it's private, it's selective to you and you only. How you deal with that problem is on you. How you entangle with that problem is on you. Jada had a problem. She chose to step outside the marriage. Whether they have an open marriage or not, I don't want to get too deep into that, because that's a big rumor, but I don't want to deal with the rumor part. I'm dealing with the science part, right? So just remember and bear in mind about entanglements. To entangle, tangle, to yoke together. How the mind is yoked together with something other than itself to know about itself, if that makes sense. You see what I'm saying? And once you put that into perspective, everything changes. And you learn to navigate this experiential journey that you're on privately, right? Because you're born alone, you die alone, and you also experience alone. If you can grasp that, if you hanging out with 8 other people and you're the 9th person, your experience is different than all the other 8 people that's around you. Even in the environment, the club that you're in, the skating ring that you're in, wherever, the movie theater, it's completely different. You're entangled with them to understand that you're completely separate from them while engaging with them, if that makes sense, right? So what I've learned is to be in a constant state of engagement with detachment. So I'm engaged with other particles or people or this room that I'm in, right? Because it's teaching me something about myself, but I still have to have a detachment because I understand it's there as the mirror effect. I'm not supposed to have an attachment to that which I'm entangled with. This is where self-control come in. So, I just had to do that quick bill on that and just put everything into perspective of that word entanglement, quantum entanglement. No matter what distance you put one particle from the other particle over the unified field, when one particle spins, the other one spins simultaneously. Why? Because they're connected no matter what the distance is from each other, right? So separation is, what does that tell you? That separation is an illusion, right? It appears that we're having a separate experience, right? It has to appear like that in order for you to have self-discovery, but it's really one thing appearing as the many. I repeat, it's one thing appearing as the many. That's why when one particle spins, the other has to spin simultaneously, if that makes any sense to you, So go about your journey, deal with the entanglements, learn the lesson from the entanglements, but try not to become attached to the entanglement. Grab the lesson, not the attachment. Grab the lesson, not the attachment. And I think I'll close on that. And remember, let your last endeavor be your best endeavor, because you're only as good as your last endeavor in this life. I repeat, you're only as good as your last endeavor in this life, with every and anybody, family, friends, whatever. That entanglement is conditional. And with that, I leave you in the name of peace. Entanglement, entanglement, entanglement. Salute, peace.